it like this. I've looked 67 and I've looked 37 and I'm 57. It all had to do with the lighting.
You're looking 37, so don't worry. This is Devin Foley, CEO of Charlemagne Institute, and you are tuned in to another episode of First Tuesday Conservatives Countdown to the Election, co-hosted by Alpha News and Charlemagne Institute. Charlemagne Institute publishes Intellectual Takeout and Chronicles magazine. For this episode, we have Terry Beatley with us, who is doing yeoman's work with the Hosea Institute project, or initiative, excuse me, the Hosea Initiative, and has a lot to share about that, as well as Dr. Nathanson's role in inspiring her. He was the founder of NARAL, unfortunately a well-known entity, and again, fascinating story here. So I'll hand it over to Terry. Terry, how did you get started with this? What was the inspiration?
Well, the very beginning was as a parent of two young girls, learning that the feminists who I had believed a lot of their lies in my early 20s, they were the same people who were now stealing my parental rights. So when I learned about this, what was actually happening, in the voting booth and then down at the, the Virginia General Assembly, it really kicked me into action because I was shocked that the abortion industry lobbies our legislators all over the country. It happens in all 50 states, and lobbying so that girls can have abortions behind their behind their parents' back. And then, of course, with this thing now, the judicial bypasses, and it just really fired me up. And then I started digging into the history of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, the abortion industry. I was never pro-abortion, but I was never a pro-life activist either. But when I read through piles of books, I was shocked, and I thought, how many people don't know this information?
Oh,
And
I think a ton of people don't know it. I mean, when it came to Margaret Sanger, eugenics and other things, as well as specifically targeting Black Americans, tell us what you found. What were some of the most shocking things?
Well, it's interesting you say targeting Black Americans, because that was the next leg of this journey. I was Virginia coordinator for parentalrights.org, which is a nonprofit group that protects parental rights, obviously. And I had been traveling the state teaching about the domestic and international threat to parental rights via like international treaties, as well as everything I've already gone over, like judicial bypasses and all. And right about that time, I had been trying to connect with a Black minister in Virginia, and we kept missing each other's phone calls and all that. Well, I had already done my research on the history of the abortion industry, and I thought, well, maybe I should be showing him the video Maafa 21. That's M-A-A-F-A. If your listeners don't know, you can watch it on YouTube for free. It's M-A-A-F-A. That's a Swahili word that means great tragedy. And it's a 2.5-hour documentary about the history of Planned Parenthood and Black genocide. And sure enough, when I called that minister, this is chapter 1 in my book, by the way. When I called that minister, he answered that time, and I asked him for a 3-hour appointment. And he said, "You really need 3 hours?" And I said, "Yes, sir. 2.5 hours to watch the movie, 30 minutes to talk." And he said, "Okay, you got it." So in April 2009,
he really said yes to that? If someone had called and I said, "Can I get 3 hours of your time?" That's amazing. Oh, the hand of Providence, I tell you.
Well, no, this is where the hand of Providence came in right here, because when I was walking up the steps to his office, I was praying that God would not let me talk politics. Because I grew up in a very politically active family. It was a dinner time conversation. It's just like, peanut butter and jelly, dinner and politics.
Yep.
And so, but I didn't want to talk politics. I just wanted him to know about Planned Parenthood and what's happening to the Black race in America. And so we watched the film together, the video together, and I'll never forget, I didn't know what else to ask him when it was all over. And I just said, "Pastor Bibbins, tell me what you think." And he rolled his chair forward and he wagged his finger at me. And he said, I'll tell you what I think. I will never again vote for a pro-abortion candidate for as long as I live. For if I do, I am voting to annihilate my own race. And furthermore, abortion is wrong. And he, told me that he had been kind of mushy on the abortion issue. But from that point forward, he began preaching, the full gospel of life, and abortion was not in it. And if I was to draw a picture of that meeting when it was all over, it was like Jesus Christ pulled back the curtains on the window. And he said, see what happens when you love people with the truth. People will connect it all the way to the voting booth. And that was the very beginning. And then it was 2 months later, he had me do a 2-night program at his church. We had 55 people the first night, 110 the second night. And we were just bold with the truth, and people responded, and they made me promise I would never stop. And I've never stopped. And then later on that led to Bernard Nathanson.
Okay. And so how did you connect with Bernard Nathanson? And for those who don't know the name, tell us a little bit of background about him and his role and ideas and all of that.
Yeah, Dr. Bernard Nathanson was the father of the abortion industry. He didn't start abortion, of course, it's been around forever, but he was the father of the industry of abortion in America. So when I say that, before, these abortion mills used to be underground and they were illegal, but he was the front man, the medical face of getting abortion legalized. So he co-founded what's called today NARAL, Pro-Choice America. And then he trained Planned Parenthood on how to kill babies in the womb. They were not doing abortions until he trained them. And he personally aborted 5,000 babies. He trained doctors on another 10,000 babies. And then when NARAL overturned a 140-year-old law protecting babies in the womb in New York, in the state of New York, he then began running the largest abortion mill in the world. And it was called, ironically, CRASH, CRASH, Center for Reproductive and Sexual Health. So he's not one more abortionist. No, he's the father of the industry. But what people need to know is that's not the end of his story. And maybe we can get more into that, but which I hope we do. But he became pro-life and became a pro-life leader and reneged.
How did that happen?
Everything. Yeah, well, okay, to get into that, and then I can answer. Let me go throw it out there, and then we're done with my part of it, how I met him. So
Yeah.
I end up doing an interview with him, which I'll tell you about. But let's see. So, it all happened. I went to a prayer vigil. So after these experiences in the Black church here in Virginia, I went into prayer. I'm like, God, what am I supposed to be doing? I'm white. I'm crossing the racial divide. We're talking politics. We're all this stuff. And I was fervently asking the Lord what I should do because I didn't know. And all I could hear, that nudge, was go interview Dr. Bernard Nathanson. And I still remember I was there by myself at this vigil, and I'd signed up for the first hour. I was there alone. And I remember sitting back in my chair, like talking like this, like, God, why would Dr. Nathanson say yes? I'm a little homeschool mom in Virginia. He's the father of the abortion industry, big pro-life name now. Like, why would he say yes? And it was just silence. I knew I was supposed to try. So through a series of things, I found his number, called up there, and his wife answered. And she said, Terry, my husband is 83 years old. He's terminally ill with cancer. He has not granted an interview in well over a year. And she said, put your request in writing, fax it up here, and I'll present it to my husband, but don't get your hopes up. And so I wrote this little short letter. It's in the book, just a little 2-paragraph thing. And I prayed and prayed and prayed over it. And I faxed it up there to her. And she called me back in a couple days. And she said that to her surprise, her husband had said yes. This is November of 2009.
Okay.
And she said, can you fly to New York, or come to New York on December 1st? of '09. I said, yes, ma'am, I'll be there. And ironically, well, it's by the hand of God, providential. Where did they live? They lived in Manhattan, New York. So yeah, that's what I say. So I can get more into the interview, but that's the backstory. So he's not just one more abortionist. He's
Right.
the father of the industry, and his story's been shelved. And that's exactly where the abortion industry wants to keep it. They don't want
Mhm.
people out there to know about Bernard. So what I see as a Catholic convert, or revert rather, a revert, I was baptized early on, poorly catechized, and God brought me back home. That's a whole nother story. But what I see is that the people in the Catholic Church who already know his story, they're like, oh yeah, that's 25, 30 years old. But it's like, no, everybody needs to know this story. God's not done with it. And I've got every bit of evidence, it's in the mystical realm over the last 10 years, why every time I've been ready to quit and give up, I'm like, God, I'll never be able to get the promise that I made to Dr. Nathanson done. God does something and it keeps me fired up, and he keeps moving this thing forward. So I do need to tell your listeners what happened at the interview, but I don't want to do a monologue here.
No. Well, I'm actually dying to know. I mean, I actually converted to Catholicism as well,
Uh-huh.
and I just see, to your point of the mystical and the spiritual, I think that we are in, first and foremost, a spiritual battle,
Yeah,
and before we are in a battle over politics or anything else. And I think that
absolutely.
plays heavily into the fight over abortion and other things. At a lot of when pro-lifers go to pray outside of abortion mills and Planned Parenthood places, we're starting to see witches and people with
Yes,
the occult coming out
right,
and trying to cast hexes on people. And now we're seeing some of the founders of Black Lives Matter coming out
right.
and sharing proudly that they are doing occult practices and trying to conjure spirits and things
Right.
of this nature. So, to your point, I know it seems for a whole chunk of America saying that God had a hand in this and this and that, that just what? But I think the spiritual battle is becoming very real, and it's important to acknowledge. So tell me more about the interview with Dr. Nathanson, and as well as how he went from a founding role
Yeah.
to welcoming you into his house.
Let's see. So yeah, so I flew up there, and the interview was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and and everything was the opposite of what I was thinking it would be. So I was picturing, this big palatial condo in Manhattan, New
Oh
York.
yeah.
And his wife answered the door, and she opens it up and she ushers me into a little efficiency kitchen. I'm like, well, that
Kidding.
is not what I was expecting.
No, not if you're going to Manhattan. Not at
No.
all.
Uh, and it had been in her family for years and years and years. Let's see. So we walk through this little efficiency kitchen, and then she says, Dr. Nathanson, your guest is here. And I thought, well, that's kind of different. She called him Dr. Nathanson. And let's see. So there he was. He was sitting on this long sofa with a little chihuahua on his lap, and he waves me in, and the curtains are drawn, and he had, I think, Fox News on. Yeah, because Glenn Beck was on, because he watched Glenn Beck at 4 o'clock. And so she pulled up a hardback chair right beside Dr. Nathanson, and she left. She went to her bedroom, and I sat there with him, and he told me, he said, don't be afraid to ask me anything. He said, I'm an open book. And I think he knew I was a little bit nervous. And then after that, it's like whoosh, and then all my questions came. And I had a list of questions to ask him. And he was very, very frail. He shook when he would go to drink his cup of water. I thought the water was going to splash out of the cup. And he struck me as just very sad,
Mm.
sad to be having to even to revisit this, sad to leave this legacy behind. And I think he was my first real living example of what Christ says, to carry our cross.
Mm.
He carried his cross. He knew he was saved. He didn't know how long he'd be in purgatory, but he knew, he felt confident, but he never forgave himself. And he never just dusted his hands off and poof, got on with the rest of his life. I mean, which he did after he became pro-life, but it was always trying to end the scourge of abortion that he had unleashed on this country. So at the end of the interview, this is what changed my life forever. One question. At the end of the interview, I said, Dr. Nathanson, if you have, I said, Dr. Nathanson, I know you're too sick to get your message out anymore. If you have a message for America, tell me what it is. And I promise you, I'll deliver it across our country until it becomes common knowledge, or until Roe v. Wade is overturned, or I die, whichever one comes first. I didn't put that third one in the book because there are too many Looney Tunes out there. But and I paused. I didn't know if he would say, look, my day is done. You pro-lifers take it from here. He didn't. He said, yes. He said, continue teaching the strategy of how I deceived America.
And then that, how I deceived America.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Continue teaching the strategy of how I deceived America. And then tell America that the co-founder of NARAL says to love one another. Abortion is not love. Stop the killing. The world needs more love. And I'm all about love now. And I reached over and I shook his hand and I said, Dr. Nathanson, I'm going to get this done. And by this point, he was done. His wife was standing there, and we wrapped it up, and I thanked him, and she walked me to the door, and she smiled and she said, good luck on that promise. she was a little tiny little ballerina, tiny lady, and that door closed, and I kept looking at the door closed, and I thought, oh my Jesus, what have I just done? And I mean that. I was literally looking at the door like, oh crap.
Yeah, exactly. In the moment you say something and you realize, well, my word is my bond, and now I'm on a whole new road.
Yeah. She had a taxi driver waiting for me to take me back to the airport. And the whole way I was riding to the airport thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? Well, I was a homeschool mom back then. And so that was in December of 2009. I finished the homeschool year. And we end up moving an hour and a half away to Fredericksburg, Virginia. And it just happened. We put the kids at a Christian school, and it just happened to be Virginia's most pro-abortion, anti-parental rights state senator's district. And it was a re-election year. So God knew what he was doing. And that was the beginning of the next leg of the journey.
Well, tell us the next leg. I mean, this parental thing for folks who don't have kids right now. I have 6 kids, and
do you really? What are their ages? How old are they?
You have 8?
No. I have 2. I said, how old are your kids?
My oldest is coming up on 17, and my youngest is 2. So 3 boys, 3 girls. But I'll tell you what, some of the times that my wife is fuming the most is immediately after visits to the doctor's office, because they will literally try and push the parent out and then go through this whole thing of questions with your kid who's 12 or 13, and the questions are outrageous. I mean, just outrageous.
Oh my gosh. Here I was. See, I'm as a parental rights activist, even though I do a little bit less in that now because it's such a focus of Hosea Initiative, but the parental rights, I look at this as, if we can educate young moms and dads out there, they need to know the history of the abortion industry. They must understand the science of abortion and breast cancer and the birth control pill and breast, cervical, and liver cancer. And then the other thing is the parental rights issue. They need to know all this, because people on our side of all these issues need to have this baseline education so we can go evangelize. As far as I'm concerned, this is all part of evangelization. Okay, because God doesn't want our children stolen from us due to some atheist doctor who wants to shoot them up with Gardasil and pop the birth control pill in their mouth and put condoms in their pocket, and that what's that thing in the arm?
Oh, yes,
Oh,
I know exactly.
yeah.
The birth
So,
control
right.
matchstick thing that they stick
Right.
in there, whatever. Yeah.
Well, so here I was, my second daughter had turned 14 years old. She needed to go to the doctor to get a sports physical. This is in preparation for us going to the Christian school in
Okay.
Fredericksburg. And I'm well read on all this and, an activist. And I wasn't even thinking, because this is my Christian doctor. She's a Christian pediatrician, but my daughter had turned 14 about a week earlier. And I remember going in there, and the pediatrician looks at me and she said, Terry, you're not going to like this, but I have to ask your daughter this. I'm like, what? What's that? And she looks at my daughter and she says, Kirsten, can your mom stay in the room with us? Oh my gosh. Okay. As an activist, as a mama bear, I'm not kidding you. I think I could hear my pulse in my ear. I had to check my ear to make sure blood wasn't pouring out of my ear because I was so mad, and not really at her. I knew it was the law and what they'd done
Oh,
at the
yeah.
General Assembly.
Oh, yeah. You and my wife could get together and, yeah, just rage against the machine, if you will, because
Yeah.
it's disgusting.
Well,
So
the problem is people don't know. They don't
no,
know that the root of that is the abortion industry. It's
tell
the
us about that link.
Yeah, the link is, well, the worldview of Margaret Sanger, the founder, the founder of what became known as Planned Parenthood. She had her worldview. We've been funding her religion, her
Mhm.
worldview, and her worldview is promiscuity, birth control, and eugenics. Okay. She believed in promiscuity. She believed in complete and utter perversion, and she believed it, practiced it, and then she institutionalized it. And that's a whole nother long interview we can do. And we give seminars and conferences on this. But her worldview of promiscuity has become institutionalized. And then between Margaret Sanger and Alfred Kinsey, they began, that contagion of unlicensed sexual pleasure. And then the whole sexual revolution, that all happened in the 60s. But that's not enough. It's not enough getting abortion legalized. Now we want to get this to the children. That's it. That's our bait. If we can get to the children, well, the best way to get to the children is to cut my parental right off, to
Mhm.
guide, counsel my own child once she hits a certain age. And so that's the abortion lobby. So that's Planned Parenthood and NARAL, Pro-Choice America, down at every single General Assembly, whatever you call it in your own state. They're there. You may not be there, but you can count on it that they're there. And this is one of the things Dr. Nathanson grieved, because he never intended to annihilate parental rights. His
Mhm.
organization leading the charge on eviscerating parental rights. Here's the good news. Because of getting that bad senator defeated in Virginia, because we set out with a 10-11 month plan. And I mean, I was shooting at the hip. I had no clue what I was doing other than the word of God tells us in Hosea 4:6. That's why I named the organization Hosea. Hosea 4:6 says, my people perish for voting Democrat. No, it says my people perish for lack of knowledge. They don't have the knowledge of what the heck's going on. So, and then in Ephesians 5:11, the Apostle Paul says, what does he say? He says, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking. I quote it 1,000 times. But to shine light on it, shine light on all those evil deeds of darkness. So that's all we did. All we did was educate people all over the district. And here's the good news is I remember one day we were educating people at a big July 4th function. And this one lady walked up to the table to get ice water from us. And I said, well, can I teach you about your senator's attack on parental rights? And she said, really? She said, I've been voting for him for years. And I said, yeah, probably 7 terms. And she said, yep, for 28 years. So we showed her his voting record against parental rights. And she said, no, the first thing she said was, well, I'm pro-choice. And I said, well, I'm not trying to convince you today to be pro-life, but do you care about your parental rights? And she said, well, yeah. She said, let me see. So I showed her his rap sheet, his attack on parental rights. And she said, give me 10 of those. I'm going to give them to my best friends. She said, I will not support somebody who's stealing my parental rights. That is where the victory is. That is where we can find a lot of common ground. That is, and then when you tie in the science behind it perfectly tracks the rise in breast cancer with the rise in abortion. It's game over. This abortion industry is about to collapse. So, and so the silver bullet is Bernard Nathanson. Bernard Nathanson, I believe, when we can make this common knowledge, he will prevent the Civil War. He'll
How
prevent.
so?
How so? Because God says my people perish for lack of knowledge. And his legacy sets the most beautiful example. I mean, we've got different, I guess you'd say, baskets of people out there. Let's first just go to the mushy middle. And there are millions of Catholics. Millions of Catholics. They're in the mushy middle. They bought some of the lies of Dr. Nathanson. One of them he called the straddle, which was that you can be personally against abortion, but every woman deserves the right to choose. That's the straddle, like straddling a fence.
Yep.
And that was one of the key things. And that totally violates, Catholic magisterium. So you got millions of people in the mushy middle, but they have no clue who Dr. Bernard Nathanson was. If I had been a Catholic bishop the last 30 years, I would have made sure every single person in my diocese knew the legacy down to the details of Dr. Bernard Nathanson. He's the modern day, he's the preeminent conversion story, the quintessential conversion story. You and I and a handful of bishops know about him, and a few Catholics. But the majority of people don't. And I can say that because I've spoken in 25 different states, and we survey everybody because it's always good to know the audience that you're talking to. And we do surveys, informal surveys. And a lot of times they can be, it could be Protestants, can be Catholics, doesn't matter. Across the board, I would say anywhere, if it's a Catholic audience, I will still say about 90% of the people, it could be, say, 20% think they know about Nathanson, but when you ask them, have you read one of his books? Most of those hands go down. And if you haven't read one of Nathanson's books, you don't know Nathanson's story.
So I know we're coming up on the clock, and I know that you are jam-packed with things to do today and moving forward with, just like the rest of us are, but very quickly, what is the story? Why did he take such a 180 in life and look so sadly upon what he saw as much of his legacy?
Yeah, it's if I can ever make it to heaven, that'll be the first question I ask the Lord. If I get a chance to ask the Lord a question, it's like, God, why did you allow that to happen? And I know we have free choice and all that, because it's the irony of the timing. So Dr. Nathanson, they formed NARA in the late 60s. He began running the largest abortion mill in 1970. He ran it until the end of 1972. 75,000 abortions under his belt and paving the way for the Roe v. Wade decision. And then at the end of December, he quit the abortion mill. In January of 73, he celebrated the Roe v. Wade decision. He celebrated. He was interviewed, TV, radio. He was like, yeah, finally, it's legal, And then he became chief of obstetrics at St. Luke's Hospital in New York City. And don't let the name fool you. St. Luke's, they were birthing babies and they were killing babies. And the hospital rolls in a brand new technology about 6 months later called real-time ultrasound. So the irony is, in the year that we ended up with Roe v. Wade, the father of America's industry of abortion sees the baby on the new technology of real-time ultrasound for the very first time. And he sees that, and he begins to bond with the baby because he can see the baby smiling and sucking her thumb and wiggling her toes and all those wonderful things babies do in the sanctuary of the mother's womb. And he begins bonding with the baby, and he fully recognizes the humanity. And it's probably too long to get into all the details of, well, how come he didn't before? It's kind of like, why don't they now? They know now better than 35 years ago. So he talks to NARAL board of directors. He begs them. He's telling them we have a medical, moral, and ethical issue on our hands.
Mm.
And NARAL, like good Stalinists, that's how he describes them, as Marxist, communist, Stalinists, didn't matter. They had already gotten what they wanted, because truth doesn't matter when you're when you're a Marxist, communist, Stalinist. Truth doesn't matter. You can lie your tail off as long as you can go from here and get through the door that you want to get through. And they had gotten through their door. They didn't care. So Nathanson, he begs for 2 years, and then on the anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision, January 22nd, 1975, he submits his resignation letter to NARAL. And I have my book here, and
Okay.
I'm gonna show you that. I don't know if this appears backwards or not. I guess it doesn't.
No. That's perfect.
Okay, there, I'm gonna hold it up here. There's the book.
So what if we've been wrong, for those listening? And this would be keeping the promise, my promise to America's, quote, abortion king.
Right.
Terry Beatley.
And the reason I held that up is the name of the book. I couldn't figure out what to name the book. I had a couple different options, and then it hadn't gone to publishing yet. And Mrs. Nathanson calls me one day, and she said, Terry, because by this point her husband had died, and she said, I've been going through Dr. Nathanson's paperwork, and she said, he has something here that, I don't know, maybe you'll want for your book. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, it's his resignation letter to NARAL. And I said, nah, I don't need that. I'm like, can you FedEx it here tomorrow?
I was going to say, I'm sure you probably hopped in the car and drove right there to Manhattan.
Well, I did do that. Actually, I did do that for the pictures in the book. But she FedExes me a copy of his resignation letter. And actually, do I have the time to read this one little excerpt?
Absolutely. Times, yes. If you'd be willing to do so, that would be great.
All right. Okay. I got to find it first. So while I'm looking for this, I'll tell you the other thing is I did end up driving to New York for the pictures in the book, because I told her, I said, people really appreciate pictures. And she said, well, I do have pictures there. And she said, but I don't want to mail them only. So I drove to New York to get 3 or 4 pictures. I drove back home. Okay, so I'm looking for the resignation letter, page 175. Here it is. And this is so profound. So imagine, if you will, if every bishop across America will find out about Hosea Initiative and and our mission. We're not just like one more pro-life organization. We need them all. I mean,
absolutely.
that was not I didn't mean that in a denigrating way.
No, not at all.
We are laser focused on one primary thing, which is to fulfill the promise that Dr. Bernard Nathanson wanted, which was to teach America how and why he deceived our country, and then make sure that the nation hears that beautiful parting message. So in the last paragraph of his resignation letter to NARAL on January 22nd, 1975, he says, I don't want to be too long-winded, so I'm just going to go down the last couple sentences. The judgments of the Supreme Court were never meant to be infallible or eternal. And what if we've been wrong? If the court should soon reverse itself on the abortion issue in the light of changing times and or new scientific evidence, what an incalculable injustice will have been perpetrated. What an immeasurable, irreversible loss will have been suffered. The annual dues of NARAL are $10 a year, and the hubris of certainty. I can no longer afford those dues. Dr. Bernard Nathanson.
Wow, it's powerful.
It's so powerful.
It is. And on that Supreme Court issue, Americans should remember, Dred Scott preceded the Civil War and other things. There have been
Yeah.
changes in the past, and the Supreme Court doesn't always get everything right. And sometimes things are driven by a political agenda that you don't quite see, that's in the wings.
Well, I'm glad you said that. And that's why I want everybody, all your listeners, sign up for the webinar. It's Saturday night.
Saturday night, tomorrow,
night. 8
October
o'clock.
17.
Yeah,
at 8
October
o'clock.
17th.
Okay, and that's Eastern?
Eastern time, right.
Okay.
And the reason I said, because they've heard a piece of the front end, we didn't go over the 8-point strategy,
Yep.
but the big thing tomorrow night is it's what you're talking about. It's that political strategy. And Dr. Nathanson called it the Catholic strategy. So the name of our webinar, which I guess maybe you can post that or something on your website, it's called the Catholic strategy, the abortion industry's religious war against the church. So I'll be going for about 30 minutes because most people can't take in much more. I could probably talk about an hour just specifically on that, but we'll be going deep into the Catholic strategy. And this, I so wish every American knew it. And it even goes beyond Catholics, because the Catholic strategy, as well as the other 7 points of how he deceived our country, it impacted everybody. Everybody's lost their parental rights. Everybody has. And so we need to know. So, and that's what we're going to do. And I so thank you for inviting me on. Thank you.
No, happy to have you on. Definitely, Terry. And what is the website, the address that people should look forward to if they want to join in the webinar tomorrow, October 17 at 8 p.m. Eastern?
And I'll say it, then I'll spell it. It's hoseaforyou.org. So the apostolate's called Hosea Initiative. Nobody could type in the word initiative correctly, so we just changed it to Hosea, Hosea, like the book in the Bible, Hosea, the number 4, YOU.org, hoseaforyou.org. And then if you scroll down that homepage, and I encourage all your listeners to watch that video that's right under the top. It's an image of me speaking at the return, the day of repentance. It's just a powerful message. But then right below that is the link to the webinar. When you click on that, it's for more details and registration, and we can get you registered, I don't know, up until the webinar probably. And then it comes with a couple different, it comes with this. You'll get the little fact check booklet. Every American needs this fact check booklet. So the webinar, it's $15. That's only $15. You can pack as many people in front of your TV or your computer screen for just $15. And you get 2 of the fact check booklets. And we're going to be giving all the registrants an online link to an article I wrote for Inside the Vatican on the Catholic strategy. So anyway, get your friends, cook your popcorn, and we're going to learn history, because history matters.
It does. And primary documents, and actually digging through and seeing what the people that founded, good people and bad people, all of these things founded in the past, you really need to get into their mind. And to do that, you need to read what they wrote and what they said in the past to be able to really get where things are going and where things came from. So thank you, Terry, for your good work.
Welcome. Yeah.
Again, this has been First Tuesday Conservatives Countdown to the Election. Our guest today is Terry Beatley, who is spearheading the Hosea Initiative. And please check out the Hosea Initiative. You can go to the website, Hosea, number 4, UYOU.org. So thank you, Terry, for being with us today. And thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate your listening and your eyeballs. Thanks.